Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for my voice, and if I start coughing fits, well, you just have to bear with me. Corks, fascinating subject. Firstly, thank you, Kim. When you asked me to do this Zoom talk, I don't think you realize how much work you are creating for yourself, because our collection is written up on A4 sheets, and this presentation is something very different. I'm not quite sure what it is, but you obviously took a lot of time putting it together. So thank you. The corks were produced by, probably anyway, by William Coulson, who was a member of the post office staff, basically just by cutting impressions, or however he felt like it, into corks of various patterns. The corks, I suspect, came out of casks, because bottle corks would be too small to give a decent image that we've got here. The corks were used to frank the stamps with a date stamp elsewhere on the envelope, which is really continuing the practice which had been going on in the black and red frank area, where the black and red frank was on one part of the envelope and the date stamp was another. There are 39 corks illustrated in Stefan's catalogue. That includes buckup, which is a late entry in that corks actually finished in January 96 and buckup is later, but excludes rectangular 3x3, because I've never seen this and I can't really talk about it if I've never seen it. The Riddell-Carre collection has 66 sheets at the moment, and you'll be seeing 43 of these today. John now owns this collection, but I've got scans of it all. Within the 43, there are 32 different corks on cover cards out of the 39. So we don't have 7. 3 of these are not yet known on covers and cards. They may be discovered later. 4, there's only one example, and we don't have that. First slide. The first slide is actually not a cork, it's a steel obliterator, but it's on the 1879 fourpenny, so it was one of the gems of the collection. This is a cover to Scotland, and there are only 6 of these first fourpennies on cover known, all cancelled with a steel obliterator. The first penny is also known on cover, cancelled with a steel obliterator, and there's only one of those. The 2 stamps, and I'm only going to talk about stamps when I think it's worth mentioning them, but you'll find them on all the slides. The 2 stamps are both, obviously as they're a pair, watermarked, and looking at Stefan's catalogue, there isn't a larger multiple than a pair used of the watermark variety. The postal rates had just gone down to 4p on the 1st of April 79, having been 6p in the time when the early 4x2 was in existence. And from now on, the penny and 4p up until when the rate changed in 1890 were the most common stamps to find corks on. The steel obliterator itself was very common, and it was used from 1878 to about 1900 with gaps. Some places came back towards the end. Next slide. This is one of the early 4x2. There's only one cover. I'm not sure where that is. It's not illustrated in Tony Lovelock's book, so I'm assuming his monographs. I'm assuming he doesn't have it. It is the 2x4 is known on all values of the first issue, penny, fourpenny, sixpenny, and shilling, and it existed probably up until about 1880, 1881. So the upright stamps had not come into existence when it ceased to be around. The E.J. Andrew below it is an interesting cork. It's not in the catalogue. More research needs to be done to understand whether this is in fact a standalone cork or not. I'll be writing an article for the Goose to try and encourage people to provide information. But if anyone has an example of the E.J. Andrew, which could be masquerading amongst their early 4x2s, could they please email it to me? My email address is on the front cover of the Goose. Next slide. We now come to my first cork cover, the 5x4 thick and thin. This is rare, I think it's described as in Stefan's book. It's the fourpenny grey black, 1882 fourpenny grey black, 2 Hampstead. The sideways watermark fourpence had not been issued at this stage. If you look in the Heijtz catalogue, there are 6 rarity classifications. The Riddell-Carre corks are written up slightly differently in that we have condensed it to 3, combining the 2 common ones and combining the 3 scarce ones. So the rare is 1 or 2 examples, the very scarce 3 to 5, and the scarce 6 to 9 or 10. But as more covers are being discovered between catalogues, the rarity classifications do sometimes change. I think there were 5 changes between the 6th and 7th edition. So rather than having to write up one's collection again every time there's a change, we've stuck to doing it this way. Next slide. The first of the cards, and this is the first cork FI. There are 4 large FI type corks, and they're relatively easy to tell apart, unlike some of the other ones like the Windmills are often very difficult to tell apart. And the ones with multiple pads, if you've only got a small part example, they're often quite tricky to tell apart. The shilling's got a very nice, as a lone one, got a very nice late impression of this cork. The card has a message in English which starts off, "Postcards are rarer than fourpenny stamps." Now, that was the opinion of the writer at the time, obviously writing to a fellow collector. He's probably been proven wrong. But personally, I like cards because they have the message. So they're more like an entire letter. Letters, a bit boring because you've got the cork on a stamp, but the card has much more personal history in it. Unfortunately, too many people wrote in German, and I don't speak German. Next slide. This is another scarce cork, the 6x4. Another cover addressed to the UK. This time we've got the sideways watermark, fourpenny pale grey black. Usually, or quite often anyway, you'll find that it is the current stamp which is in issue, which the cork is landing on, because the Falkland Islands appeared to buy their stamps when they needed to post them, rather than having them sitting in a drawer like we all do, because the postage rate goes up so frequently. So we hoard ours. They went and bought them as and when, because I think fourpence was a lot of money in those days for many people, and it's and if you were registering or had a double rate, it was even more. Next slide. Middle pins. This is very scarce, but this is where I come in with the difficulty of identifying stamps. Again, the corks on stamp, or anywhere really. The middle pins is usually has a gap, but I confuse it frequently with the golf ball, and there are a lot of corks which are difficult to identify, partly because the impressions are often poor. There's over and under inking. They're sometimes struck at an oblique angle. They deteriorate with the amount of time the cork is used to cancel, and quite a way of doing things would be to consider the gaps as well between, and as well as the pads themselves, and also consider using tracing paper to trace the illustration in the catalogue and flip that on top of your cork to see whether it is or it isn't what you think it is. Next slide. Early football. This is the only entire in the collection. It was written from Government House by the wife of the governor to a friend of hers in America. You can see it received a US postage stamp of tuppence, so it could be sent across the states from east to west. And unfortunately, that's the only entire I've ever had in my collection, I think. It's a nice example of US mail. Next cork. Another unusual cork, rather than a scarce one, the diamond, is on a card, and you can see the diamond has lost many of its pads here. The card is addressed to Sandy Point, which is Punta Arenas now. Most common destinations are England and Germany, so corks sent on cover or card to some other address are often more valuable and more interesting. Next slide. Here we have the golf ball, and I'm not even sure whether those are golf balls, but they're there because that's the way we had the collection written up. There is one card in existence which appeared in Tony's monograph, but if you go to the summer 2013 supplement of the after the weekend, you'll find 3 of the corks that I don't have, which are in Tony's collection, written up. The golf ball being one, the tram lines being another, and I think the square F at the end being the third. You've got the WFI obliterator here, which was in use from 1890 to 1900, which is much scarcer than the steel obliterator, which was used in Stanley. And the third one here is tram lines, which again, this is one that is in that summer edition. There's an example on card, but we don't have that one. Next slide. Small pins. Small pins is scarce, but it was in existence for 7 months, so it's very common, or not, or more common on stamps. This is a cover, a card from Government House answering a question. The Gibraltar Government House asked whether they knew of a Captain Audley, I think the name was, in the colony, and the answer was no, he was not known. But mail from Government House is not as common as mail from elsewhere. Next slide. Another small pins, but this time a double rate cover, a foreign cover to Sweden. The marginal pair identifies this with the imperf margin as the 1887 fourpenny. Non-standard rates like double rate or registered are scarcer than ordinary mail, both empire and foreign. So they attract a premium. Next slide. Large football. This is for an olive black, 1889 fourpenny olive black, the first of the upright watermark stamps to come into existence. For fourpenny ones. No, sorry, the 1882 was there before, but this is the 1889 version. And it's the start of a 2.5-year period where we have some fairly common corks. The large football, the first bisect, being the first two, and then going on to the where are we? The large squares. This is a cover to London. Next slide. We now come to the period when the postage rate went down to twopence halfpenny. And initially, there were no halfpenny or twopenny halfpenny stamps. So the post office had to improvise, and they did this by bisecting halfpenny stamps. And if you're interested in this period, I would commend Malcolm Barton's book on the subject. It's a real work, and it's entitled The 1891 Provisionals, and it goes through all the different mailings and has pictures of most of the covers in those mailings. Fascinating book. This is from the third mailing, which itself was quite an interesting one. We have two surcharge bisect pennies and a surcharge itself, all with the surcharge shown. Unfortunately, the cover had the address removed and it's been reinstated, so that rather affected it. And there's been quite a few of those which are in the bisect period, if you look at Malcolm's book. This was meant to have been sent on the 16th, 18th of February, but the Pentar, which was the ship which was due to arrive to do that, was delayed in the Elbe by ice and didn't arrive until after that mailing should have gone. But the post office had already serviced the mail, and they serviced all of this third mailing with the steel bisect, the steel obliterator rather than the bisect. There were four examples which have survived in the book, and they, together with the fourth mailing, where there are 3 examples, went out with the Pentar when it eventually sailed on the 26th of April, the fourth mailing having being dated 26th of April. Next slide. We now have a straightforward registered example of the bisect, but the bisect is not surcharged, and none of my other ones are surcharged. This is a registered cover to Hammersmith from the 6th mailing. Next slide. Next slide is the 9th mailing. We're on the 6th still. Oh, hang on, sorry, I jumped one. Yeah. The registered was 5th mailing. This is a 6th mailing. This is a straightforward Empire rate bisect cover to Kirkland Cope in the Strand. You'll find there's a number of bisect covers were sent to that address. Next slide. This is a commercial printed wrapper with 2 bisect halfpennies. One of 2 printed matter wrappers with bisects which have survived. It's addressed to Homestead, who was a regular recipient of mail in the period. His partner, Robert Blake, ran Hill Cove on West Falkland, so there was mail going backwards and forwards between them. I've got the ones going to the UK. I haven't got any incoming mail though. Next slide. A triple rate cover with correct period use of the 6penny, again with the first bisect cork on it. 12th mailing, it's sent by Andrew Balen, acting Swedish consul, to a consulate in Sweden. this was sent in the 12th mailing, which was in September, just after the Halfpenny and Tuppeny halfpenny stamps had arrived in Stanley. So if you can find a halfpenny or Tuppeny halfpenny with a first Bisect cork on it, it's worth tracking down. We don't have one. They do exist. And so it's something to look out for. Next slide. We're still in the Bisect period, but we've now moved to the large squares. This is the 13th mailing, and it's, as far as I can see, looking at Malcolm's book, where the large square has retained all its pads. And even if you look through the, how many are there? 12 of them. 12 illustrations in Malcolm's book of the 13th mailing. Some of those, the pads have already deteriorated, and the cork is showing late stage. So early stage corks of the large square are rare. The strip of 5 up there above it are late stage. Next slide. Now the strip above it here are early stage. So you can, if you go into YouTube later, you can flip backwards and forwards and see the difference on these. And this one, the cover here, is late stage. You can see that a lot of the pads have disappeared from the early stage example of the cork. So this one deteriorated very rapidly. This is a nice cover to Montevideo. And it's sent by, was it sent by Bishop Waite Sterling, and he's saying that he would provide information on later on when it came through to him. So next slide, large block and pad. I find this quite hard to find it on stamps. It seems to be scarcer than the catalogue would suggest. But this is a card addressed to Brazil, and you identify this by the big pad in the middle at the top. And you can see that probably best on the Tuppeny halfpenny on the side there on the left, because the pad at the top here has deteriorated a bit on the card, so you can't see it quite so well. Next slide. Broken segment. This is another cork which has rapid deterioration and loses its pads very quickly. So early stage examples are much scarcer than the late stage ones. This is a card sent by Hugo Shotfield. You'll find he sends quite a lot of cards. He has relationships with various collectors, including Buckup, which we'll come to at the end. And nearly always, as far as I can see, he deals with cards rather than letters. And that is an early stage example on the card. So I say that's not so easy to find on the stamps. They appear to be more late stage. Next slide. The first Windmill. Now, here, I think it's fair to say, if you look at the impression on the card, which is one sent to England, you wouldn't actually know what that cork was, but you can tell what it is by the arrival mark more than the cancellation. But if you look at the strip of 5 above, there's some very nice examples of this first windmill. Tony suggests there are only 2 in his book, and he's got them both. Well, you can see here's the third. He should have looked at Stefan's catalogue, because that describes it as very scarce, which indicates there are at least 3. So don't believe everything you read, I'd say. Next slide. This is the large square FI. This is another case of, you see those 5 impressions on the cover. You really wouldn't know what they were if you didn't have the dates. And this is the whole problem with corks on individual stamps. Quite often, you've got a large impression like you have here on the left-hand penny, or the right-hand fourpenny, for example, but you wouldn't be able to tell what that was accurately without the date. That's a double rate cover to Montevideo, so it's quite nice from that point of view. And there's a nice clear arrival mark which confirms the cork. Next cover. This is another of those F covers. This is the pointed nose one. As I said earlier, if you've got a nice impression of the F, you can tell them apart. But if you've got, like the previous slide, that rather big smudge, you can't tell very much. This is the fourpenny, olive grey black, addressed to New York. This had an interesting journey, in that it was initially delivered to Beverley, which I think is in Yorkshire. And you'll see there's a little X's against US America and Massachusetts down the bottom. So it was put back into the post. And there's lots of nice Hull, Beverley, New York, and Beverley, Massachusetts transit stamps on the back. And eventually it arrived at its destination. I suspect it would have got lost today if it had gone to the post like that, but they tried a lot harder back in the day. Next slide. This is another selection of corks that I don't have, or John doesn't have. The 5x4 and gap, which they're all very nice and clear, these ones. The diagonal cut, the one on the Tuppeny halfpenny is very nice, very clear. And an unidentified cork, which may well be a diagonal cut if you turn it the other way up and compare it there. It's not quite on the same angle, but it's got the same shape, and the large pads on the right are cut off by the stamp, so they don't continue the right way across. But I suspect it probably isn't unidentified. It probably is diagonal cut, but it's sitting there unidentified at the moment. It's nice, and it's on an 1894 stamp, which is the right period. Next slide. Pardon me now. First small FI. Fine. This is common. It was in use for 7 months. It's a nice, clear example of the cork on the card, which is addressed to Germany, and you can see my problem. Well, you can't actually, because I can see the problem, because I got the picture of the back of the card here as well as the front. It's all written in German. I don't understand it. London Transit tells you it must be April 19th, the Falkland Island one, but it's a strange one because there's no date stamp as far as I can see, or very, very faint date stamp. Next slide is a little football. Is that correct?
If I can get to it. Yep, it is. Yep.
Okay, well, I've obviously got in the right order here. Little football. This was common. It was in use for 4 months. The pads are fairly uniformly rectangular, which is something to bear in mind when you're looking at one of these and looking at a first bisect, because the first bisects are slightly different. The cover here is underpaid, which is slightly surprising since it's an OHMS cover. It's addressed to New York. It should have 8p on it, and it's got, what's that, 6p halfpenny on it. 4p olive grey black and an 1891 Tuppeny halfpenny dull blue. Next slide is Banbridge.
Right.
Here, there's a recent edition. I couldn't resist adding a Banbridge cover. It's the only philatelic chap amongst the collection apart from Buckup, but because the cork was named after him, I thought it ought to be there. But the commercial one is the card, which has actually got quite a nice example of the Banbridge cork. Card is to England, as is the cover, and the various reversed watermark stamps were issued about this time. So any reversed watermark stamp prior to the Banbridge cork is likely to be worth looking for. We now come to the triangular FI, and we're now getting to the stage when most of the corks were only around for one mail, and so are much scarcer on stamps than the previous ones up to this date. Triangular FI is very scarce. There's no Falkland date stamp, which is unusual, but a nice clear impression of the cork and clear transit and arrival marks, which date the cover too. We go to large 2x5, another very scarce cork on cover, and it's an unusually clear example of the cork on the cover, addressed to Western Supermare, Ronnie Spafford's old stamping ground. Next, Pincers. Pincers is scarce. There are a lot of pincers around on stamps, so a very poor impression on the card here. But again, you can work it out from the various date stamps. And an unusual destination in the card is sent to Russia. We now move to small Windmill. That's very scarce again on covers and cards. This is fairly typical, the impression on the cover. The small windmill is quite often applied more than once, so double impressions, and that's what this one appears to be. And it's you probably can work it out that it is that, but if that was on a single standalone stamp without anything else, you might have difficulty persuading someone you were trying to sell it to that it was a small windmill and it wasn't just a big splodge. Metal ring. The metal ring, again, very scarce. This is one where more covers or cards, I think they're all cards probably, have been discovered over recent times, so it is becoming less scarce than it was. It was originally rare with one example, and now I think it's got to the stage of being very scarce, which is 3 to 5. It's not a cork. Who knows what it is? It could be a German hand stamp, metal hand stamp. It's only on one mail. Next one, large Windmill. Quite an attractive cork, this one. This is addressed to Germany. And these ones are all fairly clear. And I think the large Windmill is probably the only windmill which tends to be fairly clear and easy to identify. Last small FI. Well, you can see from the card that the FI bit is not terribly easy to identify. So, you know, you have to use your imagination a bit when identifying this particular cork. Again, only one male, so very this is scarce, and there are more of these around because there's more than one male. There's more around on stamps. Again, not a very good impression on the card, but you probably would be able to successfully work that out as the cricket ball if it was just on a single stamp because of its shape. We now go to Africa. Interesting cork, this one. We obviously spent a lot of time and effort carving that one.
Yeah.
It's rare. There aren't many of these around, and I think it's fairly scarce on stamps as well. Again, one male only. This one's addressed to England. We come to Stonehenge, another rare one. This particular item is quite interesting in that it is the only known Swedish reply paid postcard from the Falkland Islands. About 5 reply paid postcards were sent from the Falkland Islands in the 19th century. So quite interesting from a postal history point of view, written by our friend Hugo Schottfeld in German. So I don't know what it says, but obviously replying to someone who's asked for something in Sweden. We now go to the incomplete windmill. And if you look at this one, the cover addressed to America, the left-hand ones, you could possibly work them out as incomplete windmills, but they're not very well applied. And if you look at the example on the stamp above, that may or may not be an incomplete windmill. It does look slightly like it on the left-hand side, which is why it's sitting there. But the windmills are difficult to tell apart. Next one is little 4x2. Again, very scarce. Hamburg arrival here. I don't know what this. I think this might have been more than one there. In fact, another Schottfeld one. There's a really nice example of this cork on the sixpence top right, where you can clearly see the L of the pad on the top right, and most of the cork. Whereas you look at the one on the card, you can't, and you can tell that you can tell what it is by the date. Next slide. This is 2 that I don't have. Actually, I think they're both ones where they don't exist on cover and card yet. The interesting thing to look at on this particular slide is the Tuppeny. You will find almost Tuppenys with corks. That is because the Tuppeny went on sale on the 23rd of December 1895, and this last large FI is the only cork that could be on a Tuppeny, because that one was 21st December 1895 to 11th January 1896, and the Tuppeny was not a stamp which you'd actually use for mail. It was a double rate, maybe on printed matter or something like that, but it wouldn't be a natural stamp for you to use. And then the other one is pretty rare on stamps, the small 2x5. The next slide, the broken windmill. This one was the first cork I ever bought. I was wandering around Stampex and walked past rush stamps, and it was in underneath one of his display cases. Oh, I said, I'd like that. And he said, oh, I've already said I'd sell that to somebody else, but he's not here. And I looked at him rather ashen-faced, and he said, oh, well, you're here, though, so you can have it. So that was the start of the collection, as it were. And we come to the last slide, which is buckup. This you can see, if you look, the word registered, that is written in Hugo Schotzfeld's handwriting, and the number 69. This is number 69 of a series of correspondence that Schotzfeld was arranging for buckup. And he put the whole set on the cover and sent it off to Germany. It duly arrived in Germany, and the only stamp that was cancelled was that very nice round cancellation on the 9penny. The rest of his stamps were uncancelled. So Mr. Buckup was not very happy. And he parcelled up there must have been quite a lot of them, parcelled them up and sent them back to Hugo Schotzfeld, presumably with a very rude note telling him to get it dealt with. And it then went to the post office again, and I assume it was William Coulson. He created a special cork for Mr. Buckup and cancelled the rest of his stamps with this special. And off it went back into the mail. And you'll find Falkland Island cancellations twice, arrival cancellations and transit cancellations in London and Hamburg twice. And eventually, Buckup got his cover, nicely cancelled for his collection, presumably a lot of others, highly philatelic. But I don't think a cork collection can be complete without one of these in it, just to show you that it existed. So that's it. I still only see Zoom in front of me.